Hello, my name is Todd Grill. I was born in Baltimore City. My mom and dad were very young parents. My mom got pregnant with my sister when she was 16. So she was thrown out. She moved in with my dad and his parents. I was born 5 years later, and come to find out, at the time I was born, my grandfather was dying of cancer, my dad's dad. And my dad was in the throes of heroin addiction. So it was a weird beginning. It was 1969. I was born in March 26, 1969. 2 months after I was born, my grandfather died. And when I was 2 years old, my mom and dad divorced because of his heroin addiction. So my mom was a single mom with 2 kids. We moved to Baltimore County. My mom met her second husband and they got married. My dad moved in with my grandmother. He was able to get himself clean, and I would go over there on the weekends, my sister and I. My mom's second husband was an abusive alcoholic. So I became very close to my dad and my grandmother. My grandmother was the only one in my family who attended church. She was the only one. And I would spend weekends out there sitting with her. She was my biggest influence. She always had church on, always on the radio. I didn't really understand, I was a kid. It wasn't in my background. But me and my sister would sleep in bed with her. We'd sleep sideways, and she would always make us say the prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep, pray my Lord his soul to keep, make me a good little boy for Jesus Christ's sake, amen. That was in me from like 5. So I believed in God. I didn't know why. I had no influence other than my grandmother. So my dad and I became really close. He was clean. I didn't know anything about the past. I was 6 years old. He taught me to play baseball, football. We went to games. He was my hero. My childhood at home was different. We moved to Drexel Road, which is right up the street here, when I was 10 years old. My mom had my little brother with her second husband, and he was 10 years younger than me. 2 years after he was born, my mom and stepfather got divorced because he was just a terrible person. So my mom was a single mom again with 3 kids. My escape was my weekends at my dad's. My grandmother she was a saint. She was like who I idoled. So my mom, at the time I had a hard relationship with her because of my stepfather. My mom and I struggled because my sister, when she turned 18, she moved out. My mom was single. She was trying to find herself too. She was thrown out at 16. She had kids. She didn't have the support she needed. So I was what you would consider a latchkey kid. I came home from school, in middle school. I would go across the street to get my brother from daycare and bring him home. My mom would come home. She would get off work at 5 o'clock. Well, for a 2-year period when I was a teenager, she would go out after work, meet her friend. They'd stay out and I'd have my brother. We'd have to figure out something for dinner, and it was not good. She wasn't around a lot. A couple days a week, she was not there. Growing up, I had a friend down the street. His dad was a pastor, 2 doors down. And I was the kid with the single mother who was never home. She worked 2 jobs. The nuclear families looked at me as trouble. They didn't want me. I was that kid that might steer their kid wrong. My friend's dad would take me to church. I would go on Friday nights to Bible study. I was 11 at this point. So I would go to church on Fridays with this family. And, I can look back now and know he was trying to, steer me in the right direction. The son actually was just an incredible rebel. We got in trouble one day at church. Some reason we thought it would be funny to throw these walnuts in the pool next door. and the neighbors over the fence. We were playing tag outside. Well, I got blamed for it, so I wasn't allowed to go to church anymore with them. I just had a different upbringing. Like, you know, I was kind of on my own. I didn't have a lot of supervision, so I could do whatever I wanted. And most of the time I didn't, because there was, luckily, a moral compass that I knew right from wrong. But it was tough. My mom and I's relationship was very strained because I felt like she wasn't there for me and my brother. I made it through all that, and as a teenager, I graduated high school in 1987. I was going to electrical apprenticeship school, and while I was getting ready to start, I was electrical helper. At that point, when I went out on the weekends to my grandmother's, I had something as a kid that I didn't have at home. We would eat dinner together. We would watch TV, things normal families did that I didn't have. Something that really not messed me up, but was difficult for me. I would always listen to church with my grandmother in the kitchen. I didn't even know what I was listening to. She was Methodist, but she would go to a Catholic church during the week so that she would be there for me on the weekend. I always believed, but I didn't really know why. And I was watching TV one day with my dad. We were watching sports. We always watch sports, the Orioles or the Colts. And I asked him if he believed in God. He said no. He said no because if God was real, his dad wouldn't have suffered like he did, dying of cancer. He just didn't believe. That's the environment I grew up in. So I started working in the electric. I was a helper in downtown, down at Johns Hopkins, and I met Cindy's father. He always had a way of making you feel like he cared what you were talking about. At the time, I smoked, he smoked, we'd stand outside and talk. Well, we finished the 11th floor of this building that he worked in, and I didn't know it at the time, but Cindy worked there. I mean, I knew who she was, but I didn't know she was related to him, so I would walk by and try and talk to her, but I had no game. One day I saw him pull up, and she got out of the car. So I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "That's my daughter, stay away from her." So I never talked to her for like months went by. I respected him. I didn't know why he told me, but I didn't talk to her. I didn't know he had gone and told her that I was asking about her. So she started talking to me, but she had an advantage because I didn't know. We talked about going to lunch one day, and I said, "I can't do lunch because I only get a half hour. I have to run and get everybody's lunch." I was the helper. So I only had like 15 minutes to eat, and that wouldn't work. So she agreed, and I went over to her house, picked her up. We really had no plan. You know, we were 19 years old. I was making $3 and $3.50 an hour. So we didn't have many options. We were driving around, just talking, just really talking for hours. And we stopped at Friendly's, got an ice cream, got a sundae, got back in the car, and she's like, "So what do you want to do?" A fault of mine, I say what's on my mind without thinking. So I said, "I don't care as long as I'm with you." Well, I meant it. Like, I don't know why. It just felt, I knew she was someone special. We saw each other almost every day, pretty much every day for the next 3 months. We got engaged 2.5 months in. And the weird thing was, we just had this weird connection that if you knew you met your soulmate, that's what it felt like. We just clicked. In our dating, she said she had a church that she attended. And I was never adverse to church. Like, I've always believed. I would go to church for a funeral or a wedding, and that was it. Cindy and I, she said, "I got a church, you know, I grew up in. You want to go to church?" So I said, "Sure." So we started coming to Edgemere in 1988. It was strange for me in the sense that when we walked in the door, it was like a family reunion for Cindy. Her grandparents were here, her aunts, her uncles. It was probably 10 family members. It was the Colvins, the Tallies, I forget her Aunt Ruth's name. They were all here. So it was a comfort. We would sit with them in the pew, and her entire family accepted me from day one and made me feel like I was a part of their family. We became pretty consistent, and we decided to get married, and so bizarre that our parents were just like, oh, it's cool, you know? It's like, why did they let us at 19? You know, but we got married a year later. We were 20 years old. We decided to get married, and your dad sent us through the marriage classes, which was great. He married us in June 17th, 1989. We both worked. We had, between the house payment and the car payments, we had no money. We had $10 a week each to spend, and we put $10 in gas in our tank. We joke that we didn't even know we were poor. We were so happy in our little life, we didn't know, and we had no worries. It was great. 1994, Allison was born, and 1997, Evan was born. We were living life, and we were bringing the kids to church here. We would come down, they were both christened here. We would bring them down to children's studies on Sunday mornings, and life was good. The problem I always had in the back of my mind was I had to not have my kids go through what I went through as a kid. So I was bent on always being there for my kids. I played baseball when I was a kid. No one ever came. I walked to school with my friend's dad was a coach, and we would walk, and like my mom saw one baseball game, my dad never saw any. I wanted to be there for my kids, so we signed them up for sports and dance and everything you do. I was so bent on being there and being a nuclear family, and that church became secondary. So even though we went to church, we didn't go all the time. Our kids will tell you that they had a great upbringing. They tell us that. We feel like we failed in not making church important, and now our kids, they don't go to church. It happens a lot, I guess, for younger kids, but if we had one failure, that was the ultimate failure, that wasn't important. Going back, 3 months before Cindy and I got married, 4 months, my grandmother died. That was tough. And at the time, my dad had been with my grandmother. He lived with her for 20 years. He never really learned to be on his own. He just didn't. My dad, I feel like, reverted back to drugs. Cindy and I were newly married. My sister had my niece. My dad didn't come up to see her in the hospital. So I really got mad at my dad. But Cindy and I went one Sunday morning. I called my dad and I said, you know, we're going to come see you in about a half hour. And he said, okay, I'll be here. We pulled up to my dad's house. He, at the time, had a motorcycle. He pulled away from the house on a motorcycle as we were coming up the street. And I remember saying to Cindy, I'm like, what is he doing? He knew we were coming. So I'm thinking he was just running to the store. So I go around the corner and I'm chasing him down the road and I'm high beaming him. And I saw, and Cindy saw, he looked in his rear view mirror, the side mirror of the motorcycle, so I could see his face. And I don't think he knew. And he went, damn, like he was trying to avoid us. I had to play like it didn't matter. But Cindy knew it was not good. That was the last time I saw my dad. I didn't talk to him. And I thought, one day I would, but he would have to reach out to me. 2 years later, I got a call from my sister. My dad had died. So I never got the closure. I carried that for a long time. I should have been a bigger person. Another thing that determined who I was, I was almost ashamed to say it. At my dad's funeral, I was standing over his casket, and I had made this pact in my head. And my grandfather, who I never met, I was the last grill. I was the only son left to carry his name, and that he had embarrassed my grandfather's name. I had this pact that I would try and do better to restore it, which was, looking back, incredibly stupid and burdensome to make that, but I felt that way. So when we raised our kids, I was always trying to be a good father, a good husband. And I got caught up in trying to be a provider and just trying to be a good father. And I always wanted to control every aspect of my life, financially, with our marriage. I had a hard relationship with my mom. So 2007, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. She went through a treatment, and crazy enough, she lived. She's still alive today. I look back now and I definitely thank God, because I've been able to make peace. And I will say, I always believed in God, but I never really knew until probably 1.5 years ago. There was a difference between believing and having a relationship. We were doing good. I mean, both our kids have 4-year college degrees. They have their jobs. They're doing good for all purposes. We had a normal life. Cindy and I are still best friends. Our relationship, no relationship's perfect, but it's as close as it's ever could be. I had everything. I had a happy wife, a happy life. My kids were healthy, but I couldn't find peace. I could not find peace. I was getting depressed that, somehow I was failing. Unfortunately, I have this terrible trait where I will dwell on the past, failures. Anything I've done wrong in my life, I think partially because of that stupid pact I made, I would carry things that I did that were wrong or that I didn't think were perfect, and I would dwell on these all night long. The worst thing I could do, because time by yourself for people like me, I get my own head. One night, I was just started talking to God, just kind of asking why am I in this rut? Cindy noticed that I had gotten moodier, quiet. Really, I just get quiet and don't talk. And I started listening to Bible in a Year, and I would listen to that. I would listen to it for hours, and I started feeling inner peace. I can't explain it. We, from childhood, made our kids, we would pray together at dinner, say our little grace. It was always important to us to try and have our kids, believing in God, and them knowing that we did. But there's a difference in believing and having a relationship. And I feel like during those nights, I was forming a relationship. So I came home after a couple months. I told Cindy, there's got to be something different. I'm going to retire at 55. I could retire from Verizon at 55 and get my health care. And I was like, I can't continue to work this midnight shift. I feel guilty not being with her, not spending time. My dad died at 46. My grandfather died at 58. I'm at 55, and I'm looking at mortality going, I don't want to give up time with my family for nothing. I grew up with nothing, so money's never, even though I was planning it, trying to save money, I want to have a retirement, and our happiest days in our life, we had no money, Cindy and I, and it was the happiest time of our life. So money wasn't really the driving force anymore. Security wasn't the driving force. I came to realize through watching these that it would be okay. I started reflecting on all that God has done for me. I was that kid, I was born where statistics showed I would have been the next alcoholic, drug addict, criminal, whatever you want to say. The statistics were against me because of the way I was born. And yet, God had protected me through 2 car accidents. When I was 30, I was electrocuted at work. And I spent 8 hours hooked up to a heart monitor. I don't even know how long I was connected, but in those couple of seconds, your whole life flashes in front of you. Some reason, he saved me. I've had a couple work accidents where Cindy would get a call. I was in the ambulance or in the hospital, and he saved me. When I was, I guess, my late 30s, I had a mole on my side, and I was like, for 3 years I've been telling my doctor, yeah, it got a little bigger, can you take this off? She said she wasn't worried about it. The 3rd year, my insurance was getting ready to change, so I said, can you take this off? I didn't really think anything. She took the mole off. Driving home, my cell phone rings, and it's my doctor. She says, your test results came back, you have melanoma. Hung up the phone, we got back. Cindy said, who was that? Told her what was going on. It was a tough time. But I had the surgery, they caught it barely in time. It was 0.9 millimeters. At 1 millimeter, it reaches your blood and it spreads. He saved me again. I just said, I need to get back. I need to do more. I need to appreciate what you've done for me. I can't explain it. I tell Cindy I can't explain it. I just recognized what had been done for me, that it was grace. And part of my whole problem, my whole life was pride. I wanted to make my grandmother and grandfather proud. So I tried to control every aspect of my life to make things perfect, and there is no perfect. I went to Cindy and I said, I really need to do more. I want to do more with the church. I want to get more involved. And I wanted to go back to Edgemere. Now when we come, Cindy's mom is still here and George, and it just feels a comfort. And honestly, you being a pastor, your dad, the things your dad did more funerals in my family and Cindy's family than, you would hope. It was just a connection. So coming back here just felt right. I'm in such a better place. I believe now I have a purpose. I'm not sure what it is. I keep asking him, show me what it is. There's a purpose. Through the relationship with God, I've been able to forgive, look at things from a different perspective. I can now see my mom's side, what she went through, and there's no denying that it's real. None. The peace I found, the forgiveness with my mom, the forgiveness of myself for not talking to my dad. Our biggest problem is we worry about our children. And ironically, I just got back from that trip with Allison. I spent 5 days with her. Just the fact that she's doing her MP, getting a degree from a Methodist college. There's hope. It's a sign. He's putting them everywhere. He's showing me that it's real. In the Old Testament, he forgave the Jews and how many times they turned their back, and he was more drawn to the people that needed it most than the people who felt righteous. So he saved me and gave me a life I never thought possible. And he's still showing me in my kids there's hope. So I see God's hand in my life. I didn't see it at the time. One of the first things he did to prove it, he brought Cindy in my life. And that started my journey of normalcy and my chance, And I still have work to do, There was a lot of years of thinking I was in control. There was a lot of years of thinking I determined what went on in my life. And accepting that the burden's not all mine has been life-changing, really, it is. When I see the kids in the church now, I see the young families, yours, and it's encouraging because society today is discouraging. And how far society's drifted away from the Lord is it's kind of scary. There's a peace now when I come in on Sunday. I can't explain it. There's a peace when you come in the building for that hour on Sunday where nothing matters. Honestly, I probably need to start coming on Wednesday because it starts to run out about then. I'm glad to be back here where it feels like home. I will say, because of Christ, there is hope for people that feel hopeless. I've been there, I've done it, and I know for a fact, no matter where you come from, there's hope if you believe.